What's up guys, and welcome to my Saber full build guide. Saber is going to be the brand new wind destruction DPS coming as the part of the Fate update on July 11th. So in this video I'm going to be taking you over a breakdown on her kit and everything you do need to know, including her Lightcones, Relics, and Relic stats. And with that being said, let's dive straight in. Saber's basic attack deals wind damage to one designated enemy. Her skill is a blast damaging skill that will deal wind damage equal to 150% of her attack to a designated enemy and wind damage equal to 75% of her attack to adjacent targets. And if Saber has core resonance and her skill can be regenerated to full by consuming core resonance stacks after that instance of skill attack you do use, it will first increase the damage multiplier for that instance of skill by 14% for each core resonance stack you do consume, and it will also consume all core resonance to regenerate energy for Saber after attacking. Otherwise, it will regenerate 3 points of core resonance. Her ultimate deals wind damage to all enemies and additionally will deal 10 instances of damage. Each instance is dealing wind damage as well, that will be dealt to a random enemy. And after you do use her ultimate, it will give her access to an enhanced basic attack called Release the Golden Scepter, and only the enhanced basic attack can be used. The enhanced basic attack gains 2 core resonance for Saber and deals wind damage to all enemies. If the enemies on the field is 2/1 when you do use the enhanced basic attack, it deals wind damage equal to 150%/220% of Saber's attack to all enemies. This usually allows it to make it to where Saber herself is able to deal more damage to single target enemies if there's only one on the field. Her talent lets her gain a core resonance when entering battle. Anytime someone on the team does use their ultimate, Saber gains a 60% increase to damage dealt for 2 turns, and will also obtain 3 core resonance. When you do consume a core resonance point, you will get 8 energy for Saber. The technique grants Saber a 35% increase to attack for the next battle for 2 turns and also 2 core resonance. Her A2 gives Saber a 20% increase to crit rate and gives her mana burst when entering battle or using her enhanced basic attack. On her mana burst, if Saber does have core resonance and her energy can be fully regenerated, using her skill and consuming core resonance and consuming mana burst to recover a skill point for all allies, and will allow Saber to immediately take action. Her A4 allows her to accumulate up to 120 excess energy. Once you do use her ultimate, excess energy is cleared and a corresponding amount will be given back to you. And anytime you do go into battle below 60% energy, it will immediately be regenerated to 60% energy. And her A6 increases Saber's crit damage by 50% when using skill for 2 turns. And each core resonance stack you do gain in the battle will increase crit damage for Saber by an additional 4%, stacking up to 8 times. Saber's E1 increases her ultimate damage dealt by 60% and lets her get another core resonance point when using basic attack or skill. E2 gives Saber access to a defense ignore for each point of core resonance she does gain in the battle. That is 1% and stacks up to 15 times. When you trigger core resonance skill multiplier effect, each point will additionally increase the multiplier for that skill instance by 7%. E4 increases her wind res pen by 8%, and using her ultimate increases her wind res pen by an additional 4% that stacks up to 3 times. And her E6 increases the wind res pen of her ultimate damage by 20%, and the overflow energy in her bonus trace is now increased to 200 rather than 120. The first time you do use ultimate after entering battle, you regenerate 300 fixed energy for Saber and can be triggered once every 3 ultimates used. For the Lightcone section, first and foremost, the best in slot is obviously going to be your signature Lightcone, which does increase the wearer's crit damage by 36%. When using ultimate, increases the wearer's attack by 40%, and if the wearer's max energy is greater than or equal to 300, regenerates a fixed amount of energy equal to 10% of the wearer's max energy, and once again increases the wearer's attack by 40% for 2 turns. The crit damage stick is kinda whatever since she already has a bunch of access to crit in her base kit, already giving you up to 50% and further. And also her best teammates always consists of a action advance that buffs crit damage, primarily Sunday. So this actually giving you crit damage is not too great, but it's still just a nice bonus to have. The second part being very easy for her because when you do use her ultimate, which is her biggest source of damage, you get a 40% increase to attack, and if you have 300 or more energy, you're able to get more energy back and gain an additional 40% increase to attack. So attack is the stat that she is somewhat deprived of. So attack buffs on her are really nice, and this Lightcone makes it less deprived because you're getting up to a 80% increase to attack, which is very good, with her also being able to easily get it because her energy requirement is higher than that. Being able to fully utilize this Lightcone and it also giving you a very easy access to up to 80% increase to attack is why it is her best. Another really good option for her is actually Finon's signature Lightcone. increasing the wearer's base speed by 12, and when dealing damage, ignores 18% of the target's defense. After the wearer uses ultimate, gains Blazing Sun, which is removed at the start of the turn. While holding Blazing Sun, increases the wearer's damage by 60%. Primarily good for the first two parts, the increase to base speed helps you achieve a much easier speed threshold to get a -1 setup with the support. So a base speed increase is, well, not too needed, but still does make her easier to build and helps you focus less on speed. Mainly for the fact that it also just gives you a free access to 18% defense ignore, since she doesn't really have any in her kit outside of E2. So if you're able to stack this defense ignore and add more, such as Sunday E1, or if you're using Sparkle, Sparkle E2, and if you're running a debuffer with her, such as Saber or the newly buffed Silverwolf, Defense Shred, and you're pairing it all together, the higher the value of Defense Ignore / Shred, the better it becomes. So it on its own is not going to be super valuable, but when you do stack up more pairs, so again Defense Shred from a debuffer or the dupes of support Eidolons, it becomes a lot more apparent for the damage. Last part just gives you 60% damage dealt for like one attack after using ultimate if you do use it properly, which is still going to be nice for that next attack you do. Uptime on it can be a bit iffy, but it still is something you can utilize. But again, it's mainly for these two up here, and that is why it's another great option. Another really good one is the Herda Shop Lightcone, which increases the wearer's attack by 8% in the battle every time the wearer attacks. That stacks up to 4 times. And when dealing Weakness Break, increases the wearer's damage dealt by 12% for 2 turns, and at S5, it's a 16% increase to attack per stack, with a 24% increase to damage dealt for 2 turns, when you do Weakness Break someone. Very easy to stack up the first part, as all you have to do is attack, and now you get a free 16% increase to attack per stack for the entire rest of the battle. Since she does also have a form of action advance in her kit giving her a full turn, it becomes even easier to stack this up for herself. And as I mentioned, attack is a stat that she's a bit deprived on, especially without her signature Lightcone. This is another Lightcone that's going to help you a ton with that, as it gives you up to a 64% increase to attack. And as she does have a bunch of hits in some of her attacks, you can actually get the weakness break pretty easy, along with toughness damage being pretty alright. So if you are able to get the extra 24% damage dealt for the full effect, it becomes really strong, which is why overall it's another fantastic option. Another really good option is a Danheng's signature Lightcone, which does increase the wearer's crit rate by 18%. When the wearer uses their basic attack, they gain a stack of Dragon Call for 2 turns. Each stack increases the wearer's attack by 18% and energy regen rate by 6%, and can be stacked up to 2 times. Crit rate increase is overall better than something like crit damage just because it makes her easier to build. Yes, she does have crit rate access in her kit, and she also has something like Sunday who also buffs it, but you still need to get a good amount. So this makes it even easier to build her, especially as now less focus on crit rate to get a good stat will need, but at the same time it can end up helping you overcap, so definitely be sure to note that as well. And the last part, giving you the Dragon Call to get an attack and energy regen increase, is easy for her since she does have the enhanced basic attack that you do use, so you usually always will have at least 1 stack active. Might be a bit iffy to get 2 because you will need to weave in an extra basic attack every now and then if you do want to have full uptime, but even with 1 it's still going to be good as it's free attack and energy regen. Attack again is going to be a good stat, and energy regen is going to make you get your ult even faster, which makes this Lightcone another overall great option to use. Another good option is the new Battle Pass Lightcone for destruction characters, which increases the wearer's crit rate by 12% and skill and ultimate damage increased by the wearer for 24%. Can't S5 it as I'm making this video now, but when you are able to, it's a 20% increase to crit rate and a 40% increase to skill and ultimate damage. Same thing as I mentioned with Danheng, the crit rate is nice, but it can help you end up overcapping, so be sure to note for that. But it does give you a free increase to skill and ultimate damage, but unfortunately it doesn't account for enhanced basic attack, which is going to be the other biggest source of damage. So you're not going to be able to buff that with her Lightcone, but it is still buffing your skill, which you do use a lot, and ultimate, which is your biggest source. Both of that getting up to a 40% increase in damage dealt and at 24% at S1 is why it's another overall option you can use, as it is relatively easy to use since there are no requirements. Another option you can use is Under the Blue Sky, which increases the wearer's attack by 16%, and will increase the wearer's crit rate by 12% for 3 turns when defeating an enemy, and at S5 it's a 32% increase to wearer's attack, and a 24% increase to crit rate when defeating an enemy. So a nice attack percent increase for free is going to be good for our overall damage, and defeating an enemy will give you even more crit rate. Just like I mentioned with the last 2 Lightcones, be sure to account for if this ends up making you overcap. But if you're able to use it to where it doesn't make you overcap, you're going to be able to allocate even more stats into other things such as attack percent, speed, crit damage, and so on. Which overall makes this another good lower side investment option to use. For the best relic sets, She does have two to name primarily. The difference between these is very small, so use whatever you do have best. The one that does have the better performance, if assuming the same stats, is going to be Wave Strider Captain. 2-piece increase in crit damage by 16%, and the 4-piece, when the wearer becomes a target of another allied target's ability, will gain a stack of help that stacks up to 2 times. When you do have 2 stacks of help, using ultimate consumes all help stacks to gain a 48% increase to attack for 1 turn. 2-piece will increase any source of damage you do when you are critting, as it increases crit damage. And with Saber, you always are running other characters that will target her, such as a action advanced character like Sunday especially. And if you're running Sunday, Sunday himself can stack it up right away, as his skill and ultimate do both count as a single target buff, making Saber herself the target of those abilities. And then you would use her ultimate to gain a 48% increase to attack. You just need to make sure you are playing right to have this actually up for the most part, because if you don't have the 48% attack increase, you're practically just not having a 4-piece relic set at all. So you need to make sure you constantly have 2 stacks of help on Saber herself, and then have ultimate fast enough to consume the help stacks to gain a big attack increase. She is able to do it, and if you are able to get the full effect, it becomes the overall best in slot. The one right behind it is 4-piece Scholar, which 2-piece increases crit rate by 8%, 4-piece increases damage dealt by skill and ultimate by 20%. After using ultimate, additionally increases damage dealt by the next skill by 25%. So opposite of Wave Strider, instead of crit damage, it's crit rate to make her easier to build for a healthier crit ratio. 4-piece will permanently give you a free skill and ultimate damage increase, and after you do use your ultimate, the next skill you use will get a 25% increase to damage dealt. Unfortunately, this does not affect her basic attack as something like Wave Strider would, because Wave Strider increases attack, which will benefit her overall damage. This is just her skill, ultimate, and then the next skill if you do use ultimate, which is why Wave Strider is overall better, but again, the difference isn't that massive. So if you already have a really good Scholar set laying around, feel free to just use that, as the difference is only around 1.2% or even less. It's very minimal, so just use whatever you have that has the best set. And if you have to farm it, use whatever is more efficient. Scholar is one of the most efficient farms in the game, as it's paired with Relieved Ordeal, while Wave Strider is paired with the Warrior Goddess set, which only one character really uses it right now properly. There are more, but primarily it's just one. But in cases where you might need that other set, then it becomes an option you can farm. But overall, again, if you need to farm, just choose whatever is more efficient. And if you already have a good Scholar set laying around, then you can just go ahead and use that. Past that, it is combining 2-piece, so you can do 2-piece Scholar with 2-piece Wave Strider for double crit, 2-piece and one of those with 2-piece of the attack percent increasing sets would be my recommendation, so Musketeers, Dot, Wind Soaring, or Hero set, or 2-piece and one of those with 2-piece Eagle for the wind damage increase. For Planet Ornaments, her best one is going to be Glamoth, increasing the wearer's attack by 12%, and when the wearer's speed is equal to or higher than 135/160, wearer will deal 12%/18% more damage. Free 12% attack right off the bat, and you will usually always have about 135 to hit breakpoint and do a -1 setup with Saber, so you're practically always going to be able to have a 12% increase to damage for all your damage sources, so your skill, your enhanced basic attack, your ultimate, and so on. If you are somehow able to hit 160 in battle, let's say via a buffs, or you just have a really high speed build, or you have a high speed build and you're using Finon's Lightcone, and so on. If you're able to hit 18% more damage with the 160 speed, it becomes a lot stronger. But even at the 135 for 12% damage, it is overall the best option to use. Another really good option for her is actually Space Sealing Station, which gives the wearer up to a 24% increase to attack, 12% for free, and once reaching 120 speed or higher, you get an additional 12%, which you always will have about breakpoint or higher. So it is practically a free 24% increase to attack. Attack is a lot more important on her. As I mentioned, she doesn't really have any sources, so a 24% increase to attack is going to be an overall increase to all forms of damage she does have, which is why it is a bit overall better than the next 2 options I'm about to mention. The next 2 options are very similar in performance. It just depends on what you want to focus on for having higher damage. If you want to have her enhanced basic attack and skill do more damage, Rudolin Arena is going to be the better option, increasing wearer's crit rate by 8%, and when the wearer's crit rate reaches 70% or higher, damage dealt by basic attack and skill increases by 20%. 70% or higher crit rate should not be a problem to get the free increase. So getting an increase to basic attack damage, which does benefit the enhanced basic attack, and you do still use skill relatively often, so getting an increase to that damage as well is going to be nice. So if you do want to focus on the enhanced basic attack and skill to be doing more damage, this is the better option to use. Otherwise, you would pick Inertial Sato if you do want to focus on the ultimate damage. As it's the same requirement but only 50% this time, it will increase damage dealt by the wearer's ultimate and follow-up attack by 15%. Unfortunately, she does not have a follow-up attack, so she cannot utilize that part, but this is just going to make her ultimate hit even harder. So if you want to focus less on the other sides and you want to focus on just your ultimate doing the most damage, then you would be focusing on this. But overall, I definitely recommend just getting Glam out as it's going to benefit every source. If not that, using Space Annexation because that will also benefit every source. And then if you happen to just have a really good Rulin or Solsado set, you can use one of those instead. When looking to use what main stats on your relics, for the body, you always want to run crit rate or crit damage corresponding to which one you do need more. In some cases, you can end up running crit damage because there will be some cases where you might overcap on crit. Most often than not, you will be using crit rate, but there still will be some cases where you may have too much crit rate depending on the Lightcone you're using, what relic set, what team buffs you're getting, and so on. For the feat, you primarily will always use speed to get to a -1 setup, but in the off chance you are doing a base speed and you want to run a hyperspeed support, in that case you can use attack percent boots, but it's generally advised to have speed boots to get to a -1 setup at around 135 speed or higher. For the orb, you could do wind damage or attack percent, just use whichever one that has better substats, the difference is extremely minimal. And for the link rope, primarily you will always do attack percent. The only case you run energy regen rate is if in battle you're actually getting more ultimates. If you're getting the same amount of ultimates as you are using an attack percent rope, then the difference is very big. Attack percent will outperform by a lot. But if you're actually getting more ultimates and such as maybe an extra ult or an extra 2 ults or so on, with using an energy regen rate rope, then it will be able to outperform attack percent. But attack percent is overall the most consistent one to use. For the substats, first you're going to prioritize speed to get to a -1 setup with your support. So let's say you have Sunday at 137 speed. You want to get Saber to 138 speed to 140 speed. -1 setup doesn't mean you actually have to have less than 1 speed. It can be 1 to 4 pretty much. You just want to make sure it's not too high or especially not lower because then the setup doesn't work. If you're running base speed, then you can ignore that part. Past that, it is your generic crit rate, crit damage, attack percent rolls. The crit rate stat depends on what team you're running and maybe even what Lightcone you're running. So you want to make sure you account for those buffs as well. But let's say you are just running her signature Lightcone and you're running her with Sunday. Her base kit gives 20% crit rate and Sunday also gives 20% crit rate. So in that case, you'd want to aim to have 60% crit rate because in battle with Sunday buff active and Saber herself, you will have 100%. You want to get it to as close as 100% as possible. But if you're not running Sunday and you have something like Sparkle Lightcone, in that case you'd want 70%, as Saber gives yourself 20, and Sparkle Lightcone gives 10. If you have no other crit access, you're not running a Lightcone that gives crit rate, or you're not running any supports that give crit rate, in that case you'd want to get 80% because in battle that would be 100%. Getting it to as close as 100% is going to be the goal for your crit rate. And then for attack percent and crit damage, just get as much as you can. And that does wrap up the full Saber build guide. If you guys did find the video helpful, dropping a like would be greatly appreciated. If you're new to the channel or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn the bell icon for more videos like this along with all the types of Star Rail content. And I'll see you later. Peace out.